After years of giving up my life to care for my siblings, taking them to school, paying their expenses, and hiding for our parents, they looked me in the eye and said, "You mean nothing to us now." I sat frozen in disbelief. Until I finally chose to show them exactly how my life looks without their thankless burdens. Can you imagine pouring your entire life, every last ounce of your energy and sacrifice, into the people you love most, only for them to look you dead in the eye and tell you, with a chilling smile, that you mean nothing to them? That you're completely disposable? Because that's exactly what happened to me, and it almost broke me, until it unleashed something I didn't know I had. This isn't just about family drama. It's about a comeuppance so cold, so deliberate, it carved out a new life for me, leaving them to pick up the shattered pieces of their own. My name's Eric, and I'm 29. For as long as I can remember, I've been the stand-in parent no one ever asked me if I wanted to be. As the oldest of three, when our parents drifted into this endless cycle of work, excuses, and just absence, I was the one who picked up the slack. At first, I told myself it was temporary, a phase. I was driving my siblings to school before I was even truly comfortable behind the wheel myself. At 16, I took a part-time job, and every single paycheck went straight to groceries, gas, or school supplies. Never for me, always for them. I kept repeating to myself, this is family. This is sacrifice. It's what you do. But over time, those sacrifices piled up so high, like a suffocating mountain, that my own life just started to disappear underneath them. It wasn't just about the money either. It was the emotional labor, the invisible weight. Late-night talks when my sister had her first heartbreak, covering for my brother when he skipped classes, making sure birthdays still felt like birthdays even when our parents completely forgot. I became their rock, their one constant, and I wore that role like armor. It left me absolutely drained, missing out on so much my friends got to experience. Weekend trips, college parties, even dating seriously, because someone always needed me. I convinced myself it would all be worth it. That one day, they'd look back and see what I gave up for them. But here's the thing about giving endlessly, people eventually start to believe it's your job. It stops being kindness and starts being an expectation. I began to notice little things, how my siblings spoke to me. Instead of a thank you, it was finally, or you should have done that already. They'd casually dismiss any attempt I made to focus on my own life, as if my entire existence revolved around their convenience. When I tentatively brought up thinking about moving out of state for a better job, my brother scoffed, "You can't leave us. That's not even an option." My sister chimed in, "Seriously, Eric, don't be selfish. We need you here." I laughed it off at first, a nervous, hollow sound, but it planted a seed of unease deep within me. Was I selfish for wanting my own life? The thought gnawed at me late at night, long after the house went quiet. I started replaying memories, moments when I'd swallowed my pride or given up opportunities, like the scholarship I turned down because it meant leaving home. I realized just how many times I had silenced my own voice for theirs. The breaking point, as these things often do, started small. One Sunday, we were all sitting in the living room, and I mentioned my work hours were about to get heavier because of a huge project. I asked if they could just pitch in more around the house, maybe cook dinner a couple of nights a week. My sister rolled her eyes, scrolling on her phone, and muttered, "You act like we owe you something." My brother laughed, adding, "Yeah, Eric, you're not dad. Stop trying to be in charge." The room went quiet after that, but in my chest, something cracked. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there, staring at the people I had spent nearly half my life protecting, supporting, sacrificing for. And for the very first time, I wondered if I had made a massive mistake. If all those years of carrying their burdens had done nothing but convince them I was disposable. The air felt heavy, like I was suffocating on unspoken words. I excused myself to my room, the silence deafening behind me. Lying on my bed, I could hear them laughing in the other room. The sound, muffled but clear enough, twisted the knife deeper. I thought about how many times I'd canceled plans, stayed late at jobs I hated, lent money I couldn't spare, all to make sure they were okay. And yet, the moment I hinted at needing even a shred of support, they mocked me for it. It wasn't just disrespect, it was an erasure. They had rewritten me in their minds as someone who existed only to serve them, not someone with his own dreams, struggles, or value. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept circling back to the same question: what would my life look like if I stopped? If I pulled back every bit of effort I had poured into them? I wasn't ready to answer it yet, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to imagine it. The tension only deepened over the next few weeks. Every interaction with them felt sharper, like I was hyper-aware of every dismissive comment, every demand masked as a casual request. My sister asked me to drive her to a friend's party across town, even though she had her own license. When I said no, she huffed and called me lazy. My brother asked me to cover one of his bills, and when I hesitated, he muttered that I was stingy. Each word chipped away at something inside me, replacing loyalty with a growing bitterness. And then came the moment that truly set everything into motion. The one that burned itself into my memory so vividly that even now I can recall the exact tone of their voices, the smug expressions on their faces. We were gathered in the kitchen, and out of nowhere, my brother said, "You know, Eric, you're nothing to us anymore. You've done your job, but we don't need you like that now. Stop acting like you matter so much." My sister nodded in agreement, adding with a shrug, "Yeah, you're kind of irrelevant. Don't take it personally." I froze. My fork hovered midair, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The words landed with the force of a sledgehammer, shattering years of sacrifice in an instant. I looked at them, searching for some hint that they were joking, that this was just a cruel attempt at humor. But there was nothing, just blank indifference, as if my existence had been reduced to background noise in their lives. In that moment, I felt something profound shift. The exhaustion, the quiet resentment, the unacknowledged pain, it all coalesced into a single, razor-sharp realization. If I was nothing to them, then maybe it was time they saw what nothing really looked like. And that was the moment I knew things were about to change. I didn't react right away. I sat there in silence, chewing slowly, as if I hadn't just been gutted by the people I'd dedicated my life to. On the outside, I looked calm, but on the inside, my chest felt hollow, cavernous. My hands shook slightly when I placed my fork down, though I made sure not to let them see. I told myself I would process it later, maybe write it off as them being cruel in the heat of the moment. But as the days turned into weeks, the pattern didn't fade. If anything, it grew louder. It started with my sister. She stopped asking me for rides because she simply started taking my car without permission. I'd wake up for work and find my keys missing, only to see her roll in hours later with a smirk, tossing them onto the counter like it was her right. When I confronted her, saying she needed to ask before taking something that wasn't hers, she scoffed. "Relax, Eric. You don't even use your car that much. Why are you making a big deal out of nothing?" The tone wasn't apologetic. It was dismissive, like I was the one being unreasonable for daring to assert basic boundaries. My brother, on the other hand, became more blatant with money. He had a job, sure, but it seemed like every paycheck he got was already spent before it hit his account. Every few days, he'd come to me with another excuse. He needed gas to get to work, money for a textbook, a loan he swore he'd pay back in a week. The problem was, those weeks stretched into months, and the IOUs stacked up higher than I could count. When I finally pushed back, telling him I couldn't keep covering for him, his face hardened. "Wow. So now you're going to start holding out on family after everything you've done before? What's a little more? Stop acting like you're some big hero, Eric. You owe us." That word, "oh," it hung heavy in the air. It was like a knife twisting deeper. All those years of self-sacrifice had been twisted into a debt. I wasn't their brother. I was their resource, their safety net. And now that I dared to hesitate, I was suddenly betraying them. Even our parents seemed to reinforce it. They had always been distant, but now they played into the dynamic in subtle, corrosive ways. When my siblings complained that I wasn't helping like I used to, my mom sighed and said, "Eric, you know they rely on you. Don't make things harder than they have to be." My dad added, "You've always been the responsible one, so don't start letting us down now." There it was. No acknowledgement of the years I'd already sacrificed, no gratitude, just pressure to keep giving more. I started noticing favoritism, too, in the smallest but sharpest of ways. At family dinners, conversations revolved around my siblings, their plans, their ideas, their complaints. If I spoke up about something at work or mentioned an accomplishment, it was brushed aside with vague nods or outright interruptions. Once, when I shared that I was being considered for a promotion, my sister laughed and said, "Oh, please, Eric. No one cares about your boring office job." My brother piled on, "Yeah, come back when you've done something impressive. We're talking about real life here." Everyone at the table chuckled, except me. I sat there, forcing a smile while my stomach churned. The disrespect grew bolder over time. My brother had friends over one evening, and I overheard him introducing me as basically the family's free babysitter and ATM. They all laughed, and one even joked, "Man, I need an Eric in my life." I froze in the hallway, listening to them laugh about the role I had been forced into. It was like hearing my entire identity boiled down to a joke at my expense. Every night, I went to bed with a growing weight pressing down on me. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, replaying their words and their actions, trying to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. But deep down, I knew I was unraveling. The sense of betrayal wasn't just about what they said. It was about what it revealed. All those years, I thought I was building loyalty, love, and respect. And instead, I had built entitlement. They didn't see me as a brother. They saw me as a tool. The tension in the house thickened with every passing day. I started pulling back slowly, testing what would happen if I stopped making myself so available. When my sister demanded I drive her across town, I said no. When my brother asked for cash, I told him I didn't have it. When my parents dropped hints about me picking up the slack, I changed the subject. Each time, the reaction was sharper. My siblings called me selfish. My mom accused me of forgetting where I came from. My dad muttered something about me abandoning family. The word abandonment stung the most, considering how much of my life I had already given up for them. The final straw in that stretch came one Saturday night. I had made plans with a friend, something rare for me, and I was actually looking forward to it. Just as I was heading out, my sister blocked the doorway, holding out her phone. "You need to drive me to Lisa's house," she said flatly. I told her no, that I had plans, and she rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Eric, you're pathetic. You think your little plans matter more than me? You've always been the backup parent, so stop pretending you have some big life of your own." My brother, lounging on the couch, chimed in without looking up from his game. "Yeah, man. Just do it. You're not doing anything important anyway." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I swallowed my words. Instead of arguing, I walked past her and out the door. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the whole drive to meet my friend. I kept hearing her words on repeat. "You've always been the backup parent." That was it. That was how they saw me. Not as Eric, not as a person, but as the stand-in, the extra, the disposable figure who only existed when they needed something. That night, I realized the situation had crossed a line. It wasn't just mistreatment anymore. It was a complete erasure of my identity. And if I didn't change something soon, I'd lose myself completely. But even as I began to pull away, I had no idea just how much uglier things were about to get. The weeks after that Saturday night only cemented the growing distance between me and my siblings. I went about my days quieter, more deliberate. I stopped volunteering to cook, stopped picking up their slack around the house, stopped offering my car or my money. Instead, I let them handle their own lives, something they should have been doing years ago. At first, they reacted with confusion, then annoyance, then outright hostility. But I kept my mouth shut, choosing silence over fights. And then came the moment I never thought I'd face. The moment that broke something inside me so completely that I knew things could never go back to how they were. It was a Thursday evening when I came home from work, drained but glad to finally have a moment to myself. I walked through the door, dropped my bag on the chair, and immediately noticed the odd silence. Usually, the TV was blaring or my sister was on the phone. But that night, the house was eerily still. My gut twisted as I noticed small details out of place. The shoe rack half empty. My bedroom door slightly ajar, even though I always kept it closed. I pushed it open and froze. My room had been ransacked. Drawers yanked open. Clothes scattered on the floor. My desk flipped with papers spilling everywhere. But what made my heart stop was the empty space where my laptop had been, the laptop I had worked years to buy. The one with all my personal files, my job documents, even private journals I had kept since I was a teenager. Gone. Alongside it, the small lockbox I kept under my bed, where I had saved every spare dollar I could for a future I still hadn't dared to plan. That box had held nearly $3,000. Money scraped together paycheck by paycheck. Also, gone. My pulse pounded as I turned and found my brother leaning casually against the door frame, arms crossed, his expression a mixture of defiance and smugness. "Don't look at me like that," he said flatly, as if I had no right to be shocked. I asked him where my stuff was, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. He shrugged. "Relax, Eric. We borrowed it. We needed the money. You'll get over it." Borrowed? That word echoed in my head like a cruel joke. My stomach churned as the reality sank in. My own siblings had gone into my room, taken my savings, and walked off with the one thing I used to work to breathe outside of them. I demanded to know where it was, what they had done with it. And my sister's voice floated in from the hall, casual as if asking about dinner. "We sold it and we used the money. What's the big deal? You'll just earn it back." You always do. I felt the air leave my lungs. My chest tightened, a wave of dizziness washing over me. I stepped back, staring at them as though I didn't recognize who they were anymore. This wasn't just selfishness. This was betrayal. Years of sacrifice, years of carrying them. And this was how they repaid me. By stripping away the one thing I had kept for myself. What did you spend it on? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My brother smirked. Bills, clothes, a night out. Doesn't matter. It's not like you needed it. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists against the wall, to shake them and make them see what they had done. But all I could do was stand there in stunned silence as they turned away, dismissing me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. That night, I locked myself in the hollowed shell of my room and sat on the floor, surrounded by the mess they had left behind. I kept replaying their words, that smug look on my brother's face, my sister's cold indifference. My eyes landed on a crumpled photo on the ground. Me at 18, holding my siblings' hands at my high school graduation, smiling as though the world was heavy, but still worth carrying. I barely recognized the kid in that photo. Tears burned my eyes, but I forced them back. The anger was stronger than the grief. This wasn't a simple act of disrespect. It was a declaration. They had taken not just my belongings, but my trust, my faith in the idea that family meant something. They had crossed a line. And I knew deep down that nothing I did for them would ever be enough. For the first time in my life, I let myself feel the full weight of resentment. I wasn't just tired, I was done. And in that quiet, wrecked room, a thought began to take shape. If they truly believed I was nothing to them, maybe it was time to let them live in a world where I wasn't there at all. It was the kind of thought that doesn't leave once it arrives. It lingers, sharp and dangerous, until it carves its way into resolve. And that was the night everything began to shift inside me. After the night I found my room torn apart and my savings gone, something inside me snapped. But it didn't explode outward the way I expected. There was no screaming match, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, the anger folded inward, heavy and suffocating, pressing me down into silence. For the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The days that followed blurred together. I went to work, kept my head down, and came home to a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. Every time I walked past my siblings, I felt the weight of betrayal sitting like a stone in my chest. They acted as though nothing had happened. My sister flaunted new clothes she couldn't have afforded without my stolen money. My brother talked casually about nights out with his friends. They didn't even hide it. Worse, they seemed to revel in my silence, mistaking it for weakness instead of restraint. I stopped eating dinner with them. I started locking my door, not that it stopped them before, but it gave me a sliver of control. My appetite faded. My energy drained. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, my mind cycling through every memory of the last decade, the times I paid their bills, drove them to practice, defended them when teachers called home, covered for them when they messed up. Each memory now felt poisoned, twisted into proof of how thoroughly I had been used. At work, people noticed the change. A coworker asked if I was okay, that I seemed distracted. I forced a smile, brushing it off. But inside, I felt like I was crumbling. The promotion I'd been working toward, the one bright spot I had, suddenly felt meaningless. What was the point of climbing higher if I came home every night to this pit where everything I earned was stripped away or dismissed? The absolute lowest point came 2 weeks later. I checked my bank account and saw withdrawals I didn't recognize. Hundreds gone. I called the bank, convinced it was fraud, only to find out it was my brother. He had stolen my debit card, memorized my PIN, and used it to cover his rent that month. When I confronted him, my voice shaking with fury, he didn't even deny it. He just shrugged and said, "Relax, Eric. You always bail us out anyway. I just saved you the trouble." That was the moment I realized I couldn't stay. I couldn't fight them anymore. Couldn't beg for respect that would never come. I was drowning in a family that saw me as nothing but a lifeline to exploit. The thought of living like that for another year, another month, even another week, it was unbearable. So, I started planning. Quietly. Secretly. At night, instead of lying in bed replaying their betrayals, I opened my phone and researched apartments, small ones, far enough away that they wouldn't come knocking. I calculated how much I'd need to cover a deposit, rent, and a few months of food. My savings were gone, but I still had my job, and with each paycheck, I siphoned off whatever I could into a separate account they didn't know about. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I began decluttering my room in subtle ways, packing away things I didn't need daily, selling a few items online for cash. I told them I was just cleaning up, but in truth, I was preparing for the day I'd leave without a word. Each small act of preparation was like a breath of fresh air. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a sense of direction. The hardest part was the emotional shift. I stopped confiding in them, stopped caring about their approval or recognition. When my sister bragged about something trivial, I no longer nodded along. When my brother mocked me, I no longer defended myself. I became quiet, detached, almost invisible. They didn't notice the change. They just assumed I was sulking. But in reality, I was building walls they would never break through again. One night, as I folded clothes into a box I'd tucked away in the back of my closet, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. My face looked tired, older than 29. But behind the exhaustion, there was something new in my eyes: resolve. I wasn't just the backup parent anymore. I wasn't their scapegoat, their safety net, their tool. I was Eric. And slowly, I was clawing my way back to myself. Still, I couldn't help but ache at the thought of what I was leaving behind. There was grief tangled in the anger. Grief for the family I thought I had, for the love I believed would eventually come. That grief cut deeper than anything else. But beneath it, something stronger stirred. The realization that my life didn't have to revolve around their ungrateful demands anymore. I was at rock bottom, yes. But for the first time, I saw a path forward. And little did they know, every step I took in silence was bringing me closer to the moment they'd finally see what their lives looked like without me. It's strange how quickly life begins to change once you stop pouring yourself into a black hole. The first few weeks of my quiet withdrawal were the hardest. I felt hollow, disconnected, unsure if I was really capable of breaking free. But then, little by little, the tide began to turn. I stuck to my plan. Every paycheck, I peeled off a portion and slipped it into that hidden account. At first, it was small, barely noticeable. But watching the numbers grow, even just a little, gave me something my family had stripped away for years: hope. I cut out every unnecessary expense. Not because I enjoyed depriving myself, but because every dollar I saved was a step closer to freedom. Work became my refuge. I poured my energy into projects, volunteered for tasks others avoided, and stayed late. Not because anyone asked me to, but because it gave me a sense of purpose beyond my family's demands. My boss noticed. One Friday afternoon, he stopped by my desk and said, "Eric, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but keep it up. You're becoming one of the most reliable people here." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been reliable my whole life, just never for myself. Within a couple of months, the promotion I had quietly doubted was offered to me outright. It came with a pay raise, not life-changing, but significant enough to fuel my escape plan faster than I expected. I accepted with a steady voice, but when I got back to my car that evening, I gripped the steering wheel and let out a shaky laugh. For the first time in years, I felt like the sacrifices were paying off. But not for them. For me. I also began repairing the parts of myself I had neglected. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from. At first, I felt awkward, ashamed for disappearing on them for so long, but to my surprise, many welcomed me back warmly. "We figured you were just busy with family stuff," one old friend said over coffee. I nodded, not bothering to correct him, but inside I felt a pang of guilt for all the time I had wasted. Still, sitting there, laughing about old memories, I felt more alive than I had in years. I even began dipping my toes into things I had always wanted to try. I signed up for a gym membership, something I never would have considered before because of the cost. I started running, lifting weights, watching my body change little by little. It wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. With every mile I ran, with every pound I lifted, I was shedding years of burden I had carried for others. At home, the shift was undeniable. My siblings grew restless when I stopped catering to them. My sister would complain that the fridge was empty, and I would shrug and tell her she knew where the store was. My brother tried to guilt me into covering his bills again. And when I refused, he called me selfish. But the more they pushed, the less I cared. Their words no longer cut the way they used to. They bounced off the armor I was building. The most satisfying moments were the ones where my absence was undeniable. One evening, I came home to find my sister crying because she had missed a party. No one was there to drive her, and she hadn't figured out the bus schedule. My brother got an eviction notice taped to his door because he hadn't paid his rent on time without my help. My parents scolded me for not stepping in, but I stayed quiet, watching them squirm under the weight of responsibility I had carried for so long. Each time, a small voice inside me whispered, "This is what they wanted. To see what life looks like without you." As my savings grew and my confidence returned, I started looking at apartments more seriously. I visited a few places, walking through quiet hallways, peeking into small but cozy spaces. They weren't much, but they were mine. I could imagine coming home at the end of the day, cooking dinner without judgment, sitting on a couch that no one else claimed, falling asleep without worrying who might take what was mine. I also began keeping notes, little reminders of moments that had led me here, my siblings' insults, my parents' dismissals, the stolen money, the betrayal. Not because I wanted to wallow in bitterness, but because I knew how easy it was to doubt myself. When guilt crept in, when the words selfish echoed in my head, I opened those notes and reminded myself, this isn't selfish. This is survival. Slowly, people at work started to see me differently, too. I wasn't just the dependable background guy. I was becoming someone with ideas, someone who could lead. At meetings, when I spoke, people listened. That spark of respect, the kind I had never received at home, fueled me like nothing else. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just surviving, I was rising. Each step forward was a reminder that I was more than the role my family had trapped me in. I was carving out my own identity, piece by piece. But as my life began to improve, the cracks in theirs grew wider. And it was only a matter of time before they tried to pull me back into their chaos. The more distance I created between myself and my family, the clearer things became. I could see their lives unraveling without my constant intervention, like scaffolding being kicked out from under a fragile structure. My sister struggled to keep up with school and her social life without someone to chauffeur her everywhere. My brother sank deeper into debt, scrambling to borrow from friends when I refused to hand over cash. My parents, once content to ignore everything, suddenly started calling me more often. Their voices laced with a sharp edge of expectation. Eric, they need you. Why are you being so cold? But while they scrambled, I was moving forward. At work, the promotion I had accepted started to bear fruit. I wasn't just another name on the roster anymore. I was managing small teams, coordinating projects, and sitting in meetings where real decisions were made. With that came new connections, people who saw value in me, who treated me as someone capable, not someone disposable. One senior manager, Mr. Dalton, took a particular interest in me. He was blunt but fair, and after a long day in the office one evening, he pulled me aside. "You've got potential, Eric," he said. "Don't waste it. Too many people let their personal lives drag them down. You've got the work ethic. Now's the time to use it for yourself." Those words stuck with me. For years, my work ethic had been weaponized by my family, turned into chains that bound me to their needs. But now I was learning how to use it for my own benefit. Financially, I was gaining ground too. With a pay raise from the promotion and the side income I'd quietly built selling off extra items and freelancing small projects online, my secret savings account began to look respectable enough for a deposit, first month's rent, and even a cushion for emergencies. Every time I checked the balance, a thrill ran through me. This was mine, untouchable. And then came the piece of information that would shift everything. One afternoon, I overheard my brother on the phone while I was walking past his room. His door was cracked, and his voice was tense. "I'll get it. Just give me more time. I swear I'll pay you back." His tone was desperate, not the usual cocky indifference. Later, when he stormed out of the house, I glanced into his room and noticed a crumpled envelope on his desk. It was from a payday loan company. I didn't touch it, but the sight alone told me enough. He was in far deeper than he had ever admitted. A week later, my sister let something slip, too. She was pacing the living room, yelling into her phone about tuition payments. "He said he'd cover it. What am I supposed to do now? I don't have that kind of money." The moment she saw me, she lowered her voice, glaring as though I was intruding. But I had already heard enough. She was falling behind financially as well. For years, they had leaned on me like I was unshakable. But now, without me, their worlds were beginning to crack. They were vulnerable in ways they hadn't been before. And though part of me still ached with the old instinct to step in and save them, another part of me, the part that had been betrayed one too many times, recognized something else. Leverage. Meanwhile, at work, my role was expanding faster than I'd anticipated. Mr. Dalton began inviting me into strategy sessions, the kind of meetings where the future of projects and sometimes even careers was decided. I wasn't just at the table, I was contributing. And the more I spoke, the more people listened. I began to realize that for the first time, I had power. Not the brute force kind, but quiet, undeniable influence. It all came together one evening when I stopped by the apartment complex I'd been eyeing. The manager showed me a small, but clean one-bedroom unit with sunlight streaming through the windows. I stood in the empty space, imagining furniture I would choose, food in the fridge that no one would take, a desk where my laptop would sit untouched. It wasn't just a place to live. It was freedom incarnate. I left that evening with an application in my hand and a lump in my throat. At home, the tension had reached a boiling point. My siblings were growing more aggressive with their demands, cornering me in the kitchen, accusing me of abandoning them, trying to guilt me back into the role they thought I owed them. My parents chimed in, echoing the same tired refrain, "Family takes care of each other." But now, I wasn't listening. Every time they tried to pull me back, I thought of that apartment, of the account that was finally mine, of the leverage I now held in the form of their crumbling dependence. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of their anger. I was in control, even if they didn't know it yet. And deep down, I began to understand that when the moment came to show them what life without me really looked like, I would be ready. The final stage didn't arrive with fireworks or some dramatic confrontation. It unfolded slowly, deliberately, like a chess game where every piece had already been positioned long before the opponent realized what was happening. I signed the lease on the apartment without telling a soul. I moved my essentials little by little, packing a box here, a suitcase there, always careful to do it when the house was empty. Clothes, important documents, personal keepsakes, all of it disappeared into my car trunk and reappeared in my new space. Each trip left my childhood room barer, emptier, until eventually there was nothing left that mattered to me. Still, I played my part at home. I didn't announce anything. I didn't warn them. I simply stopped responding to their demands with the same frantic urgency they were used to. When my sister asked for money for her tuition bill, I shrugged and said, "I can't help you anymore." When my brother tried to corner me for rent, I told him calmly, "You'll have to figure it out." Their outrage grew louder by the day, but I stayed quiet, almost detached. The real moment came one Saturday afternoon. I had spent the morning at my apartment, setting up a small desk, cooking breakfast in a kitchen that belonged only to me. And then I drove back to the family house one last time. My siblings were waiting for me in the living room, arms crossed, faces sour. My parents were there, too, sitting stiffly as if they had been called in to act as referees. "We need to talk," my brother said, his tone sharp. "You can't just stop helping us. You know we're struggling. You've always been the one to step up. What happened to you?" I sat down across from them, calm in a way I hadn't been in years. "Nothing happened to me," I said evenly. "I just stopped letting you take everything from me." My sister scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, don't act like you're some victim. You've always had more than us. You should be grateful you can help." I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "Grateful? You stole from me, both of you. You went into my room, took my savings, sold my laptop, and didn't even apologize. And you expect me to keep sacrificing? No, not anymore." They shifted uncomfortably, but my brother pushed back. "That's family. We share. You're just being dramatic." I smiled. Not bitterly, not angrily, but with a calm finality that seemed to unsettle them more than if I had yelled. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't tell someone they're nothing. Family doesn't use and discard. You've mistaken me for a safety net, but I'm not. Not anymore. And with that, I stood. I walked down the hall to my room, empty now except for bare furniture, and picked up the single bag I had left behind. When I came back to the living room, all four of them were staring, confused. "What are you doing?" my mom asked, her voice trembling. I set the bag by the door and turned to face them. "I'm leaving. My life isn't yours to drain anymore. From now on, you'll see what it's like without me holding everything together." The silence was suffocating. My sister opened her mouth, closed it again. My brother muttered something under his breath, but the bravado was gone. My dad looked at me with a mix of shock and anger, but he didn't move. I grabbed my keys, slung the bag over my shoulder, and walked out the door without another word. The air outside felt cleaner than it ever had before. That night, I sat in my new apartment, the faint hum of the fridge in the background, the city lights spilling through the blinds. I ate dinner alone at my little kitchen table. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom. The revenge wasn't loud, but it was perfect. Letting them live in the very world they had told me I was nothing in. Except now, they would see exactly how much nothing had held their lives together. And soon enough, the calls started. The first came 2 days after I left. It was my sister, her voice tight with panic. "Eric, they're threatening to drop me from my classes if I don't pay the tuition balance. You need to help me, please, just this once." I listened in silence, letting her words spill out. For years, her crisis had been mine, her panic. Always enough to make me move heaven and earth. But now I felt only a quiet detachment. "You'll figure it out," I said finally, my tone calm. "You're smart. You'll manage." Before she could protest, I hung up. The next call came from my brother. His voice was sharp, almost angry. "The landlord's serious this time. I need rent money or I'm out on the street. Stop playing games, this isn't funny." I let him rant, listening as his anger bled into desperation. When he paused for breath, I said simply, "You always said you didn't need me. Now you get to prove it." And I ended the call. My parents were slower to reach out, but when they did, it was in a three-way call with both of them on the line. My mom's voice was soft, almost pleading. "Eric, you've made your point. But you can't just abandon family. You know they need you. We need you." For a moment, the old guilt stirred in me. But then I remembered sitting on the floor of my ransacked room, staring at the empty spot where my savings had been. I remembered the laughter, the insults, the years of being told I was nothing, and the guilt evaporated. "You didn't need me when I was 16 and raising them on my own," I said quietly. "You don't get to need me now. You taught them I was nothing. Now you all get to live with that." The line went silent. I could hear my father exhale sharply, could picture the look of stunned anger on his face. My mom tried one last time, her voice cracking. "Eric, please. You can't just cut us off." "Yes," I said firmly. "I can." And I hung up. From that point on, the calls came more frequently. At first, they were angry accusations, guilt trips, even threats. Then they turned into pleas. Finally, they dwindled into silence. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that my brother had been evicted, that my sister had to drop out for a semester, that my parents were struggling to hold the house together. Without me, the cracks widened into gaping holes. The scaffolding was gone, and the structure they had leaned on for years had collapsed. Meanwhile, my life flourished. My new apartment became a sanctuary. I decorated it piece by piece, each item a symbol of independence. Work continued to go well, and with my focus free from their demands, I thrived. My health improved. My friendships deepened. And for the first time, I started dating seriously, something I had never allowed myself before. One evening, months later, I passed by my parents' neighborhood on the way back from a dinner with friends. On a whim, I slowed the car and glanced at the old house. The yard was overgrown, paint peeling from the siding. It looked smaller than I remembered, almost pitiful. For years, that house had been the center of my world, the place where I gave everything I had. Now, it was just another crumbling building. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. As I drove away, I felt a weight lift off my chest, replaced with something lighter. Peace. The revenge hadn't been in shouting or in payback. It was in silence, in absence, in letting them feel the void of everything I had given without thanks. They wanted to see what life looked like without me. Now they had. And as I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment, the city lights reflecting on my windshield, I realized something with absolute clarity. I hadn't just shown them what life without me looked like. I had finally shown myself what my life could be. Free. It's been quite a journey, realizing that the greatest freedom comes from walking away from what no longer serves you, no matter how much it hurts. What would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever had to make a tough decision like this to reclaim your own life? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.